everyone. Carla's my name, and welcome to the Pursuit of Purpose podcast. This is my podcast where I'll be talking about all the things we as a collective can do to enhance the relationship that we have with the world and with ourselves. It's very important that you do have an open mind, because some of the opinions I will discuss is going to be controversial and you may not exactly agree with it. But this podcast is exactly about that. Expanding our minds with curiosity and viewing the world through different perspectives every single day. Welcome to the 6th episode, The Way of Connection. When you think about the word connection, what is the first thing that pops up in your head? A lot of people are going to have a completely different opinion and a completely different perspective of what they think the word connection means to them. Me, personally, the word connection is the way how I connect with people and the way how the world connects with me. When I think of the word connection, I think of how we are all connected as one, which also obviously aligns a lot with the Universal Ways of Oneness. So of course, I 100% believe that we are all connected in one way or another, regardless of what your religious background is or what your opinion is or from where we came from. We all came from the one thing, which is an atom of a universal consciousness. Something started and it evolved to us being here. So we are all a singular atom of that one thing. And then you think of how bizarre it is when we are all acting like as if we are individuals. Yeah, of course, I believe that we are all individual beings experiencing a human experience, but we all live like as if we are completely opposite to the person next door. And then the way how I have connections with people, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well. I get stuck in my head how this connection could potentially play out, what this connection is going to bring for me, what the outcome is going to be of this connection, if there is even a positive or a negative outcome, and especially their influence on my life. That's what I think about when I think about the word connection. But the most important one that I want to highlight is when we have romantic connections with people, that is clearly our most vulnerable state, because you're putting yourself out there to potentially get hurt. And when you do get hurt, we are conditioned to close our hearts, just shut down, especially when something doesn't feel good to us. This happens automatically. It is a automatic response that we as a society have taught ourselves to live with closed hearts, to prevent us from feeling any pain or misery. But we forget the most important thing. If we're always living in the mind space of protecting ourselves of the what if, we're not ever going to fully experience the moment with as much grace and gratitude and love and acceptance as what we could have, because you're always living in a place from protection. And yeah, protection is a good thing to have. But when you're protecting yourself over something that hasn't happened yet, you're already coming from a negative place. When we close our hearts for the in-case possibility of being hurt, we unfortunately cannot heal from all the past experience that has hurt us. In order for you to heal, you need to have an open heart. Healing can only occur when your heart center is open for business. So what I want to discuss today is the importance of connection, how to stay connected, but most importantly, to keep an open heart regardless of what you face. I would much rather experience a moment for all of its positivity that it can bring towards me, other than only experience 50, 60, 70% and still have 30% of negativity behind me. Although that's a lot easier said than done, especially when you've got your own conditioned self, you've got your ego, you've got your past programs running in your head, especially your ego trying to protect yourself from situations that have happened and it projects them into the future, making sure they never happen again. The ego always wants to stay in control, and the time where it feels the most vulnerable is when it doesn't know what's going to happen. So it's always going to string along a scenario of every situation that you face to say, oh, well, this is why this person's done this, so I'm just going to do that. When really, that person may not have actually done that. But you just put that in your head because why? You don't know what the outcome is. So what does it do? It just tries to stay in control by telling you what the outcome will be. That's your ego's job. Yeah, it's here to help you become confident. It's here to help you push and drive yourself. But it's also here to keep you where you've always been. So it's always a good practice to know what part of your ego is coming out in certain areas and where you should allow it and where you should put a leash on it. And allowing yourself to experience 100% connection means that you need to be present. And being present means that you cannot live in the future or the past. You need to experience the moment for exactly as it comes. Not have any form of doubt. You just fully embrace it. Because, yeah, things happen, but you can't stop them. I feel sorry for people that automatically live in a closed and disconnected heart because of whatever trauma they've experienced. We sometimes drown in our loneliness. We feel isolated and disconnected when we aren't in connection with others, especially for those people that are out there doing everything that they can, trying to not be lonely. They are single and they're on every dating app, trying to find the love of their life, jumping from one person to another, just to fill the void of loneliness within themselves. Look, I agree that, yeah, it is lonely when you don't have someone to share your life with, but that is just one way of viewing it. There is a perspective in that, and that is just one perspective of that. There are hundreds of different ways of how you can view that situation. The feeling of you being lonely isn't the actual loneliness itself. It's that you emotionally feel that you need someone else to give you whatever you need. That's one perspective. But you can also turn that around and you can say, well, I'm alone. I don't have to deal with someone else's shit. I can actually go and take myself out for dates. I can actually be in my own space, in my own quietness. I can actually think for myself, process things without being consistently distracted by someone else. That's another perspective, but it's how your brain chemistry alters it. So if you think that you are lonely because you need someone, you clearly can't be in a romantic relationship with someone because you are coming from a place of need and not want. Need is very negative. It is, you're going to be clingy. You're going to need something to fulfill you. And when we need things to make ourselves internally happy, that is you coming from a place of woundedness. That is your own wounding coming out. And that is no way a healthy connection that you're going to be forming. Loneliness can be a very deadly state, as a lot of people actually take their lives because of it, especially young children when they're still in school. I've had this so much growing up where there was always that one person that had a lot of depression, anxiety, and just had a really hard time experiencing life as a teenager. The reason for people in our world that are so desperate for connection is because they are so disconnected from their own divinity. Being disconnected from your divine selves means that you are desperately seeking connection from others. You are literally gasping for a sense of acceptance and to receive love from them. There's a few ways on how we can know that we run patterns of disconnectedness or reenacting a belief within ourselves from whatever trauma. We often look for other people to fill us up, make us happy. And when they fail to do so, you end the relationship with them because they're not serving your purpose. because they're not serving you. They're not making you happy. They're not making you feel good. They're not doing the things that you need them to. And then what happens? You jump on Tinder, go on the first date with someone, you hit it off, and then the same thing happens again and then again. And you have all these men or women that you have dated that are not fulfilling you, because it's always something that happens that gives you the ick. And you say, well, all these men or women, if they wanted to, they would. And they didn't. So clearly they're not it. And then you go to the next date. And then the same fucking thing happens again. And then you literally repeat that pattern with a sense of entitlement, moving on with the expectations of them fulfilling you, when all you're doing is just becoming disappointed over and over again. And a lot of people actually go through these patterns for the rest of their lives. They go through these patterns for many lives until they have their awakening. But until you become awakened to your own shit, I feel sorry for you, because life's going to be extremely difficult. So, as you all know, the book is all about Mason, Rachel's dog, and how he taught her all of these ways. It's a very weird concept, I know, but it's only going to make sense until you actually read the book. So I'm not going to explain as to why and how it works, but it just does. Just that's all you need to know, and that's all you need to believe. Now, the example she uses from Mason is when she was driving back home, and all of a sudden she saw this little kitten in the middle of an intersection, and she instantly just ran out of her car because it almost got ran over. And she stopped all traffic, grabbed this little kitten, and she took the kitten to the vet, and she ended up adopting it, which is really sweet. And she ended up calling the kitten Sage. When she brought Sage home, she left him in the cage, and the cats that she already has kind of walked around the cage, inspected it. They didn't seem too fuss about it. They're just being curious. But then as soon as Sage saw Mason, Sage instantly just started hissing and attacking him and literally spitting at Mason. Sage was not having any of it. You can see that Sage was scared, because why the hell would it not? It just almost got ran over, had like a week at the vet, and now it's meeting this massive fluffy thing. And Sage started hissing, attacking Mason, and it honestly shocked Rachel, because she was like, oh, wow, okay, this is the first that she's ever actually experienced a cat being like this around a dog. And they instantly knew, okay, it's going to take some time to introduce them towards each other. But the thing that amazed Rachel the most is when Big Mason walked up to the cage, just looked at Sage, and he literally just lay down in front of the cage and just connected and just let Sage be. However Sage was doing, he was not fussed whatsoever that this cat was going crazy. He just literally just lay down and watched it. And in that moment, you could tell that he was connecting to Sage. And when he was connecting to Sage, he was basically telling him, hey, I know you're scared. I can see that. I'm not going to take that personally, because I don't know where you've come from. You clearly haven't met a dog yet, but I'm not going to take that personally. I'm just going to chill here. Mason didn't mirror the aggression whatsoever back to Sage. He knew that the situation wasn't about him. It was about Sage's fear. And he understood that it had nothing to do with him. As he was laying down by Sage's cage until Sage calmed down, he was energetically showing Sage that he wasn't a threat to him. And Mason knew if he stayed there long enough and showed Sage the gentleness and harmlessness of him being safe, Sage would eventually calm down and allow him in. And it honestly only took Sage about a week to get used to Mason. They just got along so well, and they were just so in love with each other. But the beauty in this is if Mason didn't initiate that first reaction, that first connection with Sage, and if he didn't give Sage the time and space to allow him to shift out of the fear-based reaction, they probably wouldn't have not been able to have such a beautiful connection. And when you use that for an everyday life experience, can you imagine the world that we would have if we all lived so divinely connected to each other, didn't react based on someone else's reactions, because you know that that's just their own conditioning, thought and patterning, and they're not pissed off at you. They're just pissed off at the situation. For example, if we can just have that openness of allowing people to just be and say however they are, how beautiful would that be? If someone came to you and they said, oh, I don't like you doing this because this is how I feel, and you don't react to it, and you just say to them, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. That is not how I intended to come across. Let's work on it and let's improve and let's be better for each other. We are so far from the way of connection as a society. It fucking hurts. It really does. And I'm talking about myself right here. I struggle with this sort of shit. And there's a lot of other ways that I have already read within the book. That's after the 6. So obviously there's 20. I've read them all. But there are so many ways that I personally myself, I'm like, fuck, all right, Carla, I've got some work to do. But that's the beauty in this. It's literally taking your ego away and saying, shit, you're not actually as good as a person as what you thought you are. But taking that away from the ego really humbles you in such a divine way, because we are here on earth. We are in the universe. This is a university of learning. If we all embodied the way of oneness, follow these 20 fucking steps of how to get there, we would literally be living in such a great society. I don't know about you, but I can feel the shift. We as a collective are becoming more aware and more awake, and we are all standing up together and moving forward as one. I can feel it. I can feel we are all slowly starting to come together as a community. The next 20 years of our lives is going to be a revolution based on us all coming together as a community and standing up for what we believe in, for what we think should actually be right. 20 Universal Ways of Oneness is just that blueprint to help us get there a lot quicker. The way of connection is one of the hardest ways to learn because we are so conditioned to live in the ego. But if we all develop this level of self-awareness, we all could honestly coexist simultaneously, and we could all have healthy, loving connections. And now you might ask, oh, how the fuck are we so disconnected, Carla? I spoke a little bit about this in my previous episode. The way how we are raised is so important. It's actually very underrated. I know people do understand and agree that, yeah, how you were brought up does influence your everyday life. But I don't think anyone or everyone has got the actual idea of how big our childhood is for how we show up in society. I don't think anyone can actually grasp how important it is. And this is one of the things that I need to express to the world. I have done a lot of research, read a lot of books. I have watched a lot of podcasts. I don't know everything, but I know something. And I know if you don't heal and outlearn the ways of how you were raised, you are going to continuously repeat the pattern with your children, and they could do the same with theirs, and following on to future generations. It all starts with you to make a change. It all starts with you to learn the right way of how to do things. Now, going back to what I was saying before, how do we get so disconnected in our society? I know that there are many ways on how we can parent our children, but there are 4 ways that all have positive impacts, but they also have negative impacts. And we as a collective need to choose which one we want to go down to in terms of raising our children. There are negatives and positives in these parenting styles, but the permissive parent is more so the person that is kind of thinking their daughter or their son's best friend. So yeah, they are there to provide them some structure, some support, some guidance, but they also more so look at them as in a friend type of way and not as in I'm your mum or I'm your dad, you better do as I say sort of thing. Yeah, they have some times where they're like that, but they're not very much in those sort of regards of structure and stability. So with a permissive parenting style, they break the connection for stability. There's not very needed guidance, and the structure between the child and the parent is very dysregulated, because 1 minute you must listen to me, and then the other you can tell me everything and I'm your best friend and it's all going to be okay. Now with this parenting style, we need to be very careful, because when these are formed from a disconnected source, the child may develop behaviors of irresponsibility. They can have a selfish lack of consideration of others' well-being, a lack of follow-through of finishing a task. Most cases, they will have poor accountability and lack of ownership. Then we've got the disengaged parent, and it's a lot more common these days, especially with the thing that's in your hand 24/7. And a lot of people may not actually realize, but this is something that is happening. When you've got a disengaged parent, it basically means that there is structure and there is a form of, I'm your parent, you must listen to me. And there is a form of authority, but the parent doesn't really exactly pay as much attention to the child. They meet their basic needs, but that's it. They don't really pay too much attention to the child's behavior or to the effort of the child, of whatever it can be. So when this happens, this breaks the connection of healthy bonding. There's much reliability or supportiveness. With this sort of parenting style, a child can then develop the behaviors of constant neediness. They have severe codependency issues. They can be very impulsive, and they have a higher risk of addiction. They will also, unfortunately, develop emotional behaviors of anger and rage. They become emotionally withdrawn or shut down, especially when conflict arises. And the worst thing of them all, they develop fears of rejection or abandonment. Then you've got me. I was raised in a rigid parenting style, and a lot of people may actually relate to this coming from my generation. Oh, well, from my background, I'm South African. So if there are any South Africans listening to me today, you may relate. So the rigid parenting style. This means that there was massive authority within the relationship between the child and the parent, meaning that you must obey with whatever they say, and you cannot step out of line. And if you do, there are going to be negative consequences associated with it. You must listen to everything that they say. You can have an opinion, but most cases, if your opinion is said at the wrong time, it can be looked back as you're talking back. So with the rigid parenting style, it is very structure based, and unfortunately with this parenting style, it breaks the connection between harmlessness and gentleness. There is structural safety, but not much emotional safety. And it depends on the parent, but most cases, it's very hard to accept a child's uniqueness in different levels of development. These children can develop behavioral programs of being easily triggered, can show signs of aggressiveness or violence. They have a poor ability to form healthy connections, impulse issues, and they may lack self-discipline. The emotional programs that come out of this could be anxiety, depression, rage, or anger. Then the very last one, the enmeshed parenting style, means that basically your mum or your dad was a helicopter over your life. They were overly involved in your doings, literally babied you, did every single thing for you, and literally just basically made you their whole center of their universe. And unfortunately, with this parenting type, you can rob your children of a sense of self. You teach them poor boundary setting skills. They can become insecure and lack of faith in themselves. And this can obviously develop incapability, leading to feelings of helplessness. And because this child is used to being the center of the parent's world, they generally do grow up very entitled without putting anyone's opinions or feelings in consideration before their own. Their behavior programs are extremely selfish. They do have a tendency to feel powerless they will have poor decision-making skills. Although even if you do fall into one of these categories, take my life for an example. I grew up with a really, really strict dad, and I love him for it because it made me the person that I am today. But if I didn't take this self-healing journey on, all of those things that I've said about the rigid parenting style, those are all going to be the characteristics that I would have embodied, and every single person that came into my life would have had to deal with those characteristics. And that's why it's so important to heal from things that are not yourself. It's just based on the conditions that you were brought up in. Although, yeah, it's a learning journey, and there are some times that I do lose my temper and all these sort of things. But it is, compared to what I used to have, it's amazing. Like, I am now the most passive person that you could fucking ever meet. Unless you really push the buttons, then that's a different story. So take me as an example. Yeah, I grew up with rigid parents, especially my dad. I love him to bits. Don't get that wrong. And I'm not the person that I would be today if I wasn't raised in that environment. But I am not the person that I am today if I didn't take responsibility for my own personal well-being and got the hell out of my head and untaught myself all of those negative traits associated from the things that I've learned at a really young age. We all have a responsibility to take in this life. It's up to you if you want to take it. It's up to you if you want to learn and evolve. If you want to choose to be a victim based on how you were raised and not actually actively changing it, what you are not changing, you are choosing. Remember that. So we at least all grew up with one parent or caregiver that had these parenting styles ingrained within themselves. But you as a person can become aware of these parenting styles and the consequences that come along with them. And we can better ourselves for our children. It is the willingness of opening our eyes to see how we are actually behaving in relationships versus to how we believe we behave in relationships. The first step is becoming aware of how you were risen, becoming aware of the structure that you grew up in. What are the negative consequences based off that structure? How you can evolve and learn those qualities, being disconnected from ourself, which leads to us showing up disconnected. But that's the thing. You cannot form a connection if you are disconnected within yourself. So the first step is we need to learn how to create and form healthy, loving connections that are so strong and deeply rooted from the heart center that cannot be broken. The way of connection, it is a beautiful one, but it is very important to actually understand that there are different ways on how we can interpret the word connection. I've only mentioned and spoke about a few different ways. I'm keen to hear anyone else's opinion based on what they think and what they believe the way of connection is for themselves and how they perceive it. But we are all one. If you are becoming nasty towards someone, you are technically being nasty to yourself. Now, before I finish this episode, I just want to quickly mention a really important aspect that we can all tap into, which will enhance our ability to form healthy connections, which will enhance our ability to stay connected, to stay within our heart space. This is such a weird way to explain it, but just bear with me. Have you ever had an experience? Mostly this will happen when you have a pet, but I mean, this can also happen in an emotional connection to your boyfriend, partner, husband, wife, whatever it is. Could even be a family member or your child, where you look at the being, you observe them, and you can actually feel their emotional state. And you can tell whether this person in this moment is happy, are they joyful, or are they sad? You can actually feel the emotions that they're feeling. That is the way of connection. But that is also, most importantly, clairsentience. We all have the ability to embody clairsentience. A lot of people that don't know what it is, it's basically just a clear feeling. You feel that you know is going to happen, or you feel that something is true, whatever it is, or, you feel that someone's lying to you, for example. We all have the ability to develop clairsentience, and clairsentience is correlated to the way of connection. Hypothetically, you come home and you can see that your pet is full of excitement and joy and just so happy that you're home. You instantly have that happiness, that connection with them of being like, yes, I'm home. Mummy's home. I miss you so much. That is clairsentience. You both are connecting and feeling the same thing all at the same time. Or when you think of someone, you think of your boyfriend, and then all of a sudden they call you. That's clairsentience. Yeah, you could be miles away. You could be miles apart from each other, but you are both connected and you're like, oh, I want to call them. And they're like, I literally just thought of you. That is clairsentience. We all have that ability. When we all try to embody the way of clairsentience and try and evolve and grow the feeling of knowing, that is when we all can become so strongly and tightly together, because you will know based on how someone's feeling, how you are going to react. You can tell someone's stressed. You're not going to mirror that back to them and amplify their levels of stress. No, you're going to go to them and you're going to give them a hug. You're going to give them the safe space that they need to just unload, which leads me to this. Only through the way of connection, we can heal and end the harm that we cause to others. Remember that being in presence allows you to form connections. Forming genuine connections that stem from presence ignites the ability of clairsentience. This means clear feeling. This means you can sense what another person or animal is feeling. Or, said in another way, you can sense the emotional state of a person or an animal. This occurs naturally when you are energetically connected to another through the connection of yourself to your own divine soul. If you practice this skill with your pets, you'll be much more sensitive and efficient in meeting their needs, because you'll be able to feel when they're lonely or sad. You'll feel when they're bored because they haven't been exercised enough or given enough loving attention or mental stimulation that day. You'll treat them less and less like objects and more like emotional beings that they are. Imagine if you could do that with people as well. You are able to sense the emotional reaction to the way you just treated them or the words you spoke to them. We would naturally be kinder and more sensitive to the well-being of others, with the capacity to feel our impact on them. That's the natural side effect of true connection. And when you strengthen your ability to connect, this leads you to the next way of oneness, the way of compassion. We all need to have divine connection within ourselves before we can have divine compassion for everyone, especially for ourselves. That's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning to the 6th episode of the Pursuit of Purpose podcast. It has been great talking about the way of connection with you. I hope you have taken something out of this. As always, I hope you learn, I hope you evolve, and I hope your world always expands. Thank you, and I will see you in the next episode.